Good evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar, Chasing the Dream. My name is Captain Dan Pionk. I'm the Executive Director of the Navy Supply Corps Foundation, and this is our first Distinguished Alumni webinar series. And thank you for joining us this evening. This is our first. We have our guest speaker, Billy Dodson, a Distinguished Alumni of the Foundation, and we plan on offering many more of the Distinguished Alumni series throughout the rest of the year and into next year. The Foundation is proud to serve all who were born the Oak Leaf, including active, reserve, prior service, and retired. As you watch tonight's webinar or after the webinar, please give us your support. Consider making a donation. You can see the QR codes on the screen. We do need your support. One of the hallmark programs of the Foundation is the Distinguished Alumni Program, and it was started in 1989 to recognize retired and former Navy supply corps officers who, after their military service, went on to distinguish themselves with careers in the public or private sector, and who credit their supply corps experience as a basic foundation of their professional achievements. To date, there's 61 distinguished alumni, including tonight's guest speaker, Billy Dodson. And each of them had three things in common. First, they were successful supply corps officers. Two, they had significant career achievements after the supply corps. And third, they credit their supply corps achievements or experience as a foundation for further professional achievements. The Distinguished Alumni Program includes such honorees as Senator Gary Peters, Roger Staubach, Bill Merritt Jr., and even Regis Philbin. And of course, Billy Dodson. So we have a great honor to have Billy with us tonight as our Distinguished Alumni and kicking off our first Distinguished Alumni webinar series. Before we get into tonight's panel or presentation, I just want to talk a little bit about the Foundation's Honor Our Heritage, Invest in Our Future campaign. You're going to hear more about this throughout the rest of this year into next year, but it's a long-term effort to expand our regular donor base to support the Foundation operations, along with our heritage and transition programs. It goes beyond the traditional funds we normally receive. We're looking for general use funds or unrestricted funds that we can sustain the Foundation. Instead of me talking about the campaign, we're going to watch a quick video that explains more about it, and then we'll get into our tonight's presentation.
The U.S. Navy Supply Corps is a community with an incredible history supporting our national defense.
You know, I think anybody that's ever worn the oak leaf can be just incredibly proud of what they've done and what their community's done. And the Foundation just perpetuates that.
The Supply Corps Foundation is really important, and it's key to the culture that the Navy Supply Corps has.
The Navy Supply Corps Foundation, made up of a diverse and elite cadre of can-do individuals who have expertise in logistics, supplies, and finance.
The amount of skill that you learn early on in the Supply Corps, especially at sea duty for me, was tremendous. You learn a lot of leadership roles. I had 75 people that were reporting to me, and these family issues, and we were away from home for over a year.
Nothing is standard textbook. Here's how you solve this. It's always the things outside of that you have to solve. And so I think supply corps are great problem solvers, and that's one of the big things I've taken away my time in the Navy and supply corps, is being a problem solver, and still am today.
You find yourself in your first year or 2 years leading a group of people larger than any of your counterparts or peers would be doing out in the commercial sector.
The Supply Corps community is one that puts their arms around you, and they make you better.
Anywhere I went, I saw a supply officer, you immediately gravitated toward them and bright smile, and you're excited to see them and talk, and they likewise.
For over 50 years, the Navy Supply Corps Foundation has provided the continuity to this amazing community by providing programs and services supporting and promoting its heritage and traditions. We take care of our own.
Many of them are mid-career and thinking about how they're going to fund their children's college education and those things, and we're there for them.
The tone is set by the Supply Corps Foundation because that is a great networking opportunity, and that pulls people together.
We need to get more people that are in the reserves or on active duty to even know the existence of the Foundation and all the good things that the Foundation does. That's what holds this community together. it's really especially important, I think, to people once they retire, because then you fade away from this community. And the foundation is, it keeps the families together. It does such great work for it.
The foundation is, and the Supply Corps in general, is just a great organization, and this is a chance to give back.
All that training that I had through my career, I can now pass on and help others break down the barriers in their careers so that they can excel at whatever they want to.
The Navy Supply Corps Foundation's Honor Our Heritage, Invest in Our Future campaign is focused on raising funds to support our mission, and we need your help. Please consider an investment in our future and help us honor our heritage. Visit our website and see how you can support and partner with us.
The foundation is critically important to keeping the Supply Corps number one in the public's eye. We do such a wonderful thing, not just what it does within the Navy itself, but for the families, for the community, for everything that goes along with it, to remember the heritage of the Navy Supply Corps. Without us advocating for it, that heritage is just not going to stay there.
We're the golden link. The Supply Corps officers are the ones that make it all happen, and we just connect it all together.
Think about how you can pay it back and give back to the foundation. There's many ways you can do that, and I just ask everyone to consider donating any amount, anything you can to support the long-term sustainment of the foundation and leave your legacy with the Supply Corps. So I hope you enjoyed that video. And again, we do need your support. Now it's my pleasure to turn the webinar over to Captain Retired Will Port, who is a foundation board member and the committee chair of our development committee. And Will is going to introduce tonight's keynote speaker. So Will, over to you.
Thanks, Dan. I don't want to take up a lot of time. I just want to explain to everybody how I came to know Billy and kind of give a little bit of background for him to be able to take it away and make a tremendous presentation tonight. I first met Billy when we crossed paths through back in the late 90s on the OpNav staff. And like a lot of people do, you run into someone for a very brief period of time. They make a nice impression on you. And then in the Supply Corps, a lot of times we go our different directions, but a lot of times we end up linking up and finding reasons to work together again. So I found myself probably in about 2014, 15, somewhere in that time frame. I was a civil servant then as a deputy ACOM over at the NAVSUP headquarters. And I had a reason to call the fleet for some information, and I was given Billy's name to give a call to get the data that I needed. And I kind of look forward to that call to be able to reconnect. So as we always do, I called up Billy for one little piece of information. We turned a 45-minute conversation. We turned that into a 45-minute conversation, and I found out what Billy's real passion is, that he had been doing photography work and writing, and he was launching into sort of a new business field and branching out and doing something way different, far afield from what I knew he was doing when we were both in uniform. So when he told me about what he was doing, and he had putting together a book of photographs from trips he had made to Africa, I came home that night. He had me so inspired. I went ahead and looked online and ordered his book, From Desert to Desert. It's a beautiful picture book. He's going to talk a little bit about it. You're going to see a lot of pictures out of this book, I believe, this evening in the presentation. But as it turns out, as Billy is quick to tell me, I was the very first one to order his book. So that's how old shipmates come together from time to time. So most recently, Billy has founded another company called Savannah Dream Safaris. And it's a company that's dedicated to setting up safari visits to sub-Saharan Africa for people of all ages and all budgets, that what they can afford. That's what he's been doing most recently. And you can check out his work and look at what he does at SavannahImages.com. As Dan indicated, Billy's work has earned him recognition as a Supply Corps Distinguished Alumni. And I won't take any more time, but I want to turn it over to Billy now for his presentation. Take it away, Billy.
Thanks, Will, and thank you, Dan. And one more time, I want to reiterate my thanks to the Navy Supply Corps Foundation, because they made me a distinguished alumnus, and I did not fit the mold. Usually the distinguished alumni are great successes in business or politics or some field that's much more respectable than the one that I'm involved in. And I really appreciate being the first to make this presentation because this is not career enhancing. You know, there's no professional development in this. It's strictly about finding your passion. My wife is an exercise fanatic, and she has a class with a woman who is about to retire. She's a grade school teacher. And her friend told her, she said, it's time to retire and to pursue my passion. She said, the only problem is I don't know what my passion is. But so her plan is to get a glass of wine and sit in the backyard and think about it and try to define her passion. Well, that's probably as good a way as any. But really, you never know. I think most thinking people do have a passion. It comes to them at some point in life. Some know early on, and sometimes it develops over time. There are those rare cases when a person's passion is also his or her profession, and that works really well, especially in the case of the Navy, because these people, we call them flag officers, and they're what make our services such a success. So it's about finding your passion. That's what I'm going to talk about, and it's also about leaving a legacy and making a difference in this world. So Dan, next slide, please. You know, this quote is from the greatest baseball movie of all time. And it means a lot to me. I noticed it when I first heard it in the movie, and I think it's poignant, and I think it should speak to anybody. And what to me it's about making every moment in life count. And it's about taking action when the opportunity is presented. So what I'm going to give you tonight is a personal story. It's a very personal story. It's my life for the last 20 years. And I hope that some benefit can be derived from it for those in the audience. And the main lesson is, or one of the main ones is that life exists outside the professional workplace. And sometimes the value of it cannot be calculated in time or money. In my mind, passions are made to be pursued. What changed for me, go ahead and go to the next slide, Dan, was between duty stations back in 2001, I had a rare lapse of judgment when I was heavily engaged in physical fitness, and a buddy of mine decided we wanted to go climb Mount Kilimanjaro. So in the lead up weeks into that climb, I was focused on getting in shape, and I lived for the day that I conquered that mountain. So I climbed the mountain, and on the way down, just before we got to the trailhead from where we'd started, my guide, a fellow named Samuel, spoke to me, and he tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, Billy, he said, would you sing with me? He said, would you please sing Amazing Grace with me? And we did it, a little off key, but we got through it. And I think it was at that point that I can say honestly that Africa really became a spiritual place for me. So we followed that once in a lifetime trip to Africa with 10 days on the plane in the Serengeti. And that's actually probably what ruined my life, as my wife would say, more than anything else. So I got back to the States and I went back to work, but my mind was still in Africa. And I thought, man, I've got to come up with a way to continue to go back to Africa and somehow make it pay for itself. So I took up photography. I had no training, no skills, but really, you don't really need it. It's not that difficult. But one thing that I did after my initial trip to Africa was I contacted the African Wildlife Foundation, which is the primary NGO in the world that supports conservation of African wildlife. And I offered to donate some of those photos. And that partnership that I established with them really led to everything else that you're probably going to see in this presentation, including the startup of the safari business last year. I had some difficulties trying to figure out a way to frame this presentation. I finally decided that what I would do I would follow the template of my own book. It's the one that Will held up and showed you a few minutes ago. I want to emphasize right now very strongly that I am not hawking this book. I'm not trying to sell this thing tonight because frankly, it was published 5 years ago and there aren't many of them left around anyway. So I'm not trying to sell the book, but I had to use something as a guide to deliver this presentation. So that's what I did. It spells out the history of my career in photography and in Africa. It talks about the conservation initiatives, and it walks the reader through 6 discrete regions of Africa. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to walk through those 6 regions And I'm going to show you just a select few photos from everyone. And Will was right. A lot of these photographs are in the book that he held up. So with that, I'll go ahead and ask you to go to the next one, Dan. And we're going to zip through these pretty quickly. The first section is Tanzania. My most potent memories are from Tanzania. You know, that was my first visit to East Africa. That's where I had the initial experience that led me to love Africa the way that I did. I hit the ground in the Serengeti, and the first impression that I had was really, it was deja vu. I had this odd feeling that I'd been there before, which in a way, I guess we all have, because mankind was born out in that area and all of our roots are there. But I was also struck by the vibrancy of life on the plains. It's in my mind, in Tanzania, the most intense experience that you can have is in the southern Serengeti. So next one, please. Okay, and in the southern Serengeti, I think the place to visit is called Ndutu. It's you visit there in February of every year. It's the wildebeest migration is there. They're having their babies, and there are 3 separate ecosystems in one very small area. They got the woodland and the hills, you have the lakes, and you have the wide open plain. And every picture that I'm going to show you here, the next 3 or 4, are all going to be from that area. Next, please, Dan. This is one of those cases where I'd much rather be lucky than good. Was taking a photograph of this giraffe, did not notice the bird until I'd already photographed it 3 times. Finally, I recomposed and I focused on the bird, and this is the result. This picture's probably made me more money than any other photograph that I've ever taken. Okay, next one. In Ndutu, like I said, it's woodlands. The lions climb up into the trees. Next. And these 2 cheetah brothers are by Lake Ndutu, and they're in the rain, and they're very, very beautiful. So Tanzania is close to my heart. Next one, please. Rwanda is also important, and there are lessons here for both wildlife and humankind. Next slide, please. I like to show this photograph because, to me, this little boy exudes happiness, and you can see he's dressed in tatters. And he's carrying his little brother on his back, but he had the most beautiful smile I've ever seen. And it's amazing to me that 30 years after Rwanda was the world epicenter of murder and savagery, you have children who walk around with these looks on their faces. Next, please, Dan. And here's another little girl. She's a beauty. But the real reason I think that most people go to Rwanda is because they want to see the mountain gorillas, which is not an easy thing to do. You know, it's physically taxing to climb up into the rainforest on the side of the hills to see these gorillas. And go ahead and hit the next slide. You know, it's quite an experience. A lot of people think it's a religious experience, but to me, it's just cool as hell. And this photograph that you're looking at here, this is a silverback gorilla. The picture's not cropped. I mean, I had a 70 to 200 millimeter lens, and if he had been any closer, I would not have been able to focus on him. But the rules are that you're not allowed to get within 7 meters of these gorillas, but the gorillas don't know that. So a lot of times they'll come up and touch you. And when I was there most recently, I was standing on a steep hillside, and a young female gorilla grabbed me from behind. I didn't see her, and she pulled on me as if she was grabbing a tree to pull herself up the side of the mountain. But it's an incredible thing to experience if you ever get a chance to do it. Next, please. This is a baby being held by its mother. Next one. And this is a silverback in the rain. This was a driving rainstorm. It was the most miserable gorilla trek I've ever had, but it cleared off just long enough to give me one photograph. Next one, Dan. I really like this photograph because this is a mama. And you can see up on her back is her baby, and the little guy had been driving her nuts. And so the look on her face is probably very similar to a lot of mothers, the way they react to their children here in the States. Next one, please. I've probably spent more time in Kenya than any other African country, and more beautiful words have been written about Kenya than any other African nation. If you've read Out of Africa or Beryl Markham's book, West with the Night, both of those books are really incomparable. I think the people, the unique combination of wildlife and landscape make Kenya absolutely special. Next one, please, Dan. This is a Maasai boy. And again, like the Rwandan children, he's a happy fellow. Next one. There are also places in Kenya where you can get close to black rhinos. Very rare and endangered. Next. And I guess mostly I associate Kenya with the elephants down in the southern part of the country at Amboseli. And this is a big bull crossing the plain, throwing dust. Next. And a baby. Next one. And this is a family group. Elephants show affection like no other wild animals that I know of. Next. Also, when I think of Kenya, I think of the big cats. And there are an awful lot of them in the Masai Mara. This male was guarding very carefully his hippo carcass against the hyenas who wanted to take it away from him. Next. Just two youngsters at sunset, beautiful light. Next. And this is probably, of all the photographs I've ever taken, this is my very favorite because it also shows the love that big cats feel for each other. Okay, next. And then moving on to the nation of Namibia. It used to be called Southwest Africa, but it's a desert country, and it's really extraordinary. The tourism in that part of the country and the part of the continent is really picking up, but it's really, really gorgeous. Hit the next one, please, Dan. This is a typical landscape in Namibia. As I said, it's a desert country, and these are the great dunes at a place called Sossusvlei. It's about halfway between Windhoek, the capital city, and the coast. And the best time to look at these things and to photograph them is at sunset or sunrise when the shadows are deep. Next one, please. And for some reason, every now and then you'll see one sparse tree out there on the plain. Next. But they also have wildlife, and that's at Etosha National Park. It's concentrated, the wildlife is, but there's a good variety. So they do have the big cats, as you see here. Next. A lot of bird life. People tend to ignore the birds, I believe, to their detriment. This is a beautiful one here called a lilac-breasted roller. Continue. Next. And the desert elephants. And I'll tell you the story behind this photograph really quick, because this is the one that's on the cover of my book. I was with a South African friend at a water hole called Namatoni, and sun was going down, and over the bush, he saw dust, and he said, Billy, he said, the elephants are coming. So I had plenty of time to set up my camera to be prepared for these guys. And when the elephants cleared the bush and saw the water hole, they all broke into a run. So this is one of my favorite African memories, and also one of my very favorite photographs. But the real attraction in Namibia, to me anyway, is the people. Go ahead, Dan. The Himba people live on the border up close to Angola, and a unique tribe, the way they dress and the very austere way in which they live. This is a little boy who was hanging around his village's water jug. Next. And this is an exquisite girl, a young girl, and you can see the hair, the headdress that they wear, all ochred up in red, just very interesting. Next. And this is another one of my favorite photos. This is not Himba people. This is the Sand people. They used to call these people pygmies a long time ago. They moved up from South Africa and occupied the Kalahari Desert in Namibia. And they still live very remotely, very primitive lifestyle. And this lady was looking at a cell phone video for the first time ever. Next. Okay, Zambezi River Valley, also gorgeous. The Zambezi River divides Zambia and Zimbabwe. It's also the river that creates Victoria Falls, and there's a lot of life around it. Go ahead. So this is from the Zambia side. This is Lower Zambezi River National Park. Elephants in the woodland. Next. And this is also part of the same ecosystem, but it's in Chobe in Botswana. This is a mother leopard looking for a lost cub. Next. But the heart of it all is the river itself and the life that's in and immediately adjacent to the river. So there are a lot of hippos. Go ahead. And go again. And a lot of crocodiles. You don't want to fall into the Zambezi River. It would be a very unpleasant ending. This is a unique photograph for me because I was literally shooting up towards the crocodile. It was on an island in the middle of the river. I was with a friend in a boat, and he got me really close to the crocodile, and I was able to get this photo. Next. and elephants always in the water. Okay. Now the stories begin. In 2015, the African Wildlife Foundation, who I did have a partnership with, and frankly still do, they asked me to go to the Democratic Republic of the Congo to photograph a monkey, looks an awful lot like a chimpanzee, called a bonobo. So I said what I always say, which is yes, and I packed up and went to the DRC. This is a hell of a place. The rainforest there, you get up in an airplane, it goes as far as you can see. Next slide, Dan. This just gives you an example. So somewhere down there in all that forest are these monkeys. Go ahead. So what you do in order to get to the research station where the bonobos are, you fly into an unnamed village in the northern DRC, which is just south of the Congo River. Then you get on a dirt bike, the back of a dirt bike, and you ride the dirt bike for 4 hours to a ranger station. The reason you ride the dirt bike is because up there are no cars and there are also no roads. So the only way through the forest is on the back of that dirt bike. So you do that. I spent the night at the ranger station in a tent. Then the next morning I got up and hiked down to a river, but you hike down through the river, through a swamp to get to the river. And it's pretty scary. We had some Congolese guides, but we couldn't keep up with them. So they basically go from roots of a tree to the next tree. I fell into the swamp and I literally was in mud up to my waist. I was with a friend from the African Wildlife Foundation named Niketi. He's only 37 years old. At the time, I was close to 60. So I felt really, really great when he got trapped in the mud as well. Next. Oh, wait one. Before, back up, please. Yeah. Hey, and then after you get through the swamp, you get in the boat and you go downriver for a couple of hours. Then you hike to the research station. And when you get to the research station, this is what's waiting for you. Go ahead, Dan. No, that was a video. Next, go back. Back. There you go. Hit the video.
So you think you want to come to the Congo and track bonobos? This is what you have to deal with. I've been stung 8 times already, up my pants leg, inside my shirt. There's no escaping these guys.
And that was one of the most miserable experiences of my life. The only way to get away from those bees was to get inside your tent. And when you opened up the tent flap to get in, at least a dozen of them would get in there with you. So the first thing you did when you get in the tent, you have to kill all the bees. So by the time I left that research station, I had literally a pyramid of dead bees in the corner of my tent. It was crazy. Now, I don't know, this is a bit of an aside, but to give you an idea what it's like in that part of the Congo, look up or do a Google search of Ashley Judd, who I think just a year or two ago went in to chase the bonobos as I did, and she was severely injured, had a compound fracture of her leg, and had to be extricated from that jungle the same way that I just described to you that I got in, which is somebody had to carry her in a litter out to the river. She had to go in the boat. She had to be dragged through the swamp. Then she had to ride on the back of a dirt bike to get back to civilization. I cannot imagine the pain that the poor girl was in. Next. Okay, this is what you look like after you've been hiking through the rainforest for about 3 hours chasing the damn bonobos. The problem that you have is the vegetation is so thick that somebody has to machete their way through it. So we had some kids, some Congolese kids who were doing that for us. But the monkeys were going through the treetops. So it was all we could do to keep up with them. And I don't know what the temperature was, but it had to have been between 95 and 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And the humidity was at the absolute maximum. It was utterly the saturation point. So this is me after slugging along, chasing these guys for a few hours. And you know, I was in pretty rough shape. I felt horrible. Next slide, please. But again, what made me feel good was my buddy Niketi, the South African dude, the Zulu. He was in just as bad a shape as I was. So you can see him here. He's exhausted. He's filthy. He's sweaty. Next slide. Now, these are our Congolese trackers. Notice there's not a drop of sweat on them. And if you'll take a look at the way they're looking at us, you don't see a lot of respect in those faces. That's a difference between being acclimated to the jungle and not being acclimated. These kids, you know, they could go on for days. In fact, if you look at the ranger there, he's even got a long sleeve coat on, but it didn't seem to bother him a bit. So the reward for all that suffering was, next slide, pictures of the bonobos. These animals look very much like a chimpanzee genetically. They're a very close relative to us, to human beings. I think there's one chromosome difference. Behaviorally, they are much different from the chimpanzee. The chimpanzees fight all the time. These make sweet love. Next slide, please. And it's a baby. Again. And this is a close-up of a bonobo. You see that another physical difference between these guys and chimpanzees is the pink lips. Next one, Dan. Okay, a story or two, if I may. Go ahead. Life in Africa can be peaceful. It can be wonderful. It can be beautiful. This is me at sunrise, waiting to go on my game drive at Ruaha National Park in southern part of Tanzania. You can see I've got my coffee. I've got my crumpets, traveling alone. I mean, it's frankly, it's utter perfection. And then you have times like next. Very, very common to get stuck in Africa, very common. I like to show this slide because you can see the people who are attached to the side of that vehicle trying to weigh it down so the right rear wheel gets traction. The supply corps is heavily represented here. So on the far left with the long hair and the very wide bottom is yours truly. Next to me is Captain Retired David Pollock and a couple of interlopers in there. And then to the far right is Commander Diana Delphonse, who I think may be on the Stennis right now. So anyway, but you always get stuck over there. There's always some disaster that happens. Your Africa trip is not complete unless you have a disaster. Next one, Dan. Okay, this is one of the two stories that I'm going to tell you here. This is in Save Valley in Zimbabwe, which is a sanctuary for rhinos and every other animal you can name. The African Wildlife Foundation sent me here as well. And the idea was I would try to get as close to and photograph and write about the black rhino. So the guide here, the gentleman with the rifle is a South African guy. His name is Dusty Joubert. And he came to me early one morning. He said, Billy, he said we've sighted some white rhinos. We're going to take you out there and we're going to try to get close and take a photograph. So ask it, you take a look at their body language here. It's just a nice day, big baobab trees in the distance. And you know, it's just a walk in the woods. It's great. But a few minutes after this, Dusty and all these other guys who are ace trackers huddled around some tracks in the sand. And the next thing you know, Dusty comes over to me and he says, Billy, he said, it's not white rhinos we're chasing here, it's black rhinos. He said, that changes everything. And I said, duh, you know, black rhino are notoriously ill-tempered. I've never seen one in a good mood. They are extremely dangerous animals. So next slide, please. So now I ask you to compare the body language that you see here to the body language that you saw in the previous slide. Everybody's on the alert here. Everybody's tense because the black rhino could come charging through there at any minute and they're totally unpredictable and you can get steamrolled and killed very easily. Next. So here was the plan. Dusty was going to call out the rhino somehow, and I was to hide behind this tree. And as the rhino came out of the bush, it was my job to photograph him. So I oriented myself in a certain way in order to get a good angle, to peek around the tree and hopefully to photograph him before he even saw me. All the guides and trackers moved away and they climbed trees so that they would be out of danger. And I'll tell you, it's a very unnerving experience to look behind you and see all these guys up in the tree staring down, waiting to see you get killed. Next. Now here's Dusty making the noise that drew the black rhino out of the bush. I cannot describe the noise that he made. I asked him later on, what the hell was that supposed to be? He said it was supposed to emulate a female black rhino in estrus. And as I said, the sound it can't be described. Next slide. Okay, so the rhino comes and he came on the side that I didn't expect him. And he brushed past the tree, almost knocked me over. And I didn't get a photograph except for this one. And then this one, he's running away. But at least I got close to him. But the fact is, I didn't get the photograph that I wanted. Next slide. The story that I'm going to tell you now is absolutely the coolest thing that's ever happened to me outside family events. This happened in Mana Pools in Zimbabwe. This is the one place in Africa, the one national park that is, where you can literally exit the vehicle and walk into the forest. You do this at your own risk, but it is allowed. You just have to accept the consequences, whatever they may be. So we did this every day. We were camped there for 4 or 5 days. And walk through the woods every day. But the greatest experience that I had there was actually at the campsite. What happened was we were setting up our tents and our dining table and our chairs. And the whole time we did that, there was a bull elephant that circled our camp and staring at us. And finally, he just stopped stone cold still and just stared directly at us. And I told my friend Will, I said, man, he wants to come over here. And in my mind, I actually saw what was going to happen, and it unfolded exactly the way that I thought. The bull elephant started walking directly towards us. I grabbed a chair, sat down in front of him. He walked up to me, stood over me. I literally could have reached up with my hands like this and pulled on his tusks had I been so inclined. I was not so inclined. And in my mind, I can still close my eyes and I can see that big corrugated trunk with the bristly hairs sticking out of it, plucking fruit from between my feet. And so what had happened there was I literally challenged this elephant, and the elephant accepted the challenge, and we made friends, we made peace. A few minutes later, the elephant stepped away from over me, and my friend, who was no longer afraid to move, grabbed a cell phone and took a photo, and it's the one you're going to see next. Okay, you know, even though this is not the closest the elephant got to me, he literally stood over me. It's still very rare to be this close to an elephant and live to tell the tale. As you can see, if you look closely at the elephant here, he is showing me who's the man, not that there was ever any doubt about that. But this was so exhilarating to me. You know, I can't say that I was scared, but I can say that I was extremely tense the whole time. So my heart was aflutter. I walked around to the front of the vehicle with Will's girlfriend, and I just stood up against the vehicle, you know, to catch my breath, because I was literally blown away by what had just happened. And then guess what happened? Next slide. He came to see me. So we made our peace that day. You know, I actually felt in a weird sort of way, I had a little bit of a bond with this guy. And we camped there for 4 or 5 nights. And after night 2, you know, this guy we'd be having our dinner, and just about 10 feet away, this guy would be there browsing fruit on the ground, and nobody paid any attention. You know, he ignored us and we ignored him. And I've got to tell you, this is one of the coolest, most special things that's ever happened to me in my life. Next slide. A different elephant, same campsite, same river, the Zambezi. Elephants do not like to be cornered and trapped. And Will's girlfriend and I walked along the bank, and we saw this guy down below us. There's only one trail down there and only one trail back. And so he did not like the fact that we had outflanked him. And he came back up the bank and confronted us. And this is where my military training kicked in. Next slide. I made damn sure the young lady was between me and the dangerous animal. Next slide. This is another quote from Field of Dreams. This is the Moonlight Graham character. And this resonates with me because he talks about his special place in all the world, which was his doctor's office. For me, my special place is wild Africa. It is my passion. I found it late in life, but it has enriched my existence beyond my capability to tell you. And that's why over the past 20 years, I've devoted my time, my talents, to its conservation and preservation, even though I've got to admit that in the long run, it may very well be a losing battle. It has given me a purpose and a legacy, albeit a small one. So the photos and the books will still be here after I'm gone, but I do take some comfort in knowing that they may influence people and behavior in years to come. Next slide. This is from the best Jack Nicholson movie ever. It's about Schmidt. And what he says here in this quote is exactly what I wanted to avoid at all costs. This is worth reading and thinking about. Next slide. So the moral of my story, stated as succinctly as possible, is don't be afraid to pursue your passion and live a little. What the hell? And next slide. And I'll tell you that I'm totally retired now, except for the safari business. Most of my days are free. If anybody has any questions about this presentation or anything else, call me or email me at any time. I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. Africa is my favorite subject. I'm always ready to talk. So don't hesitate to contact me if you have any thoughts or questions for me. And with that, I'll thank you a whole lot. And once again, I express my appreciation to Will and to Dan for allowing me to do this.
Billy, great presentation, as we've had, kind of similar to the one you did at the Navy Supply Corps Ball in Mechanicsburg this year. We certainly appreciate it. We're certainly very proud of you as one of our DAs. You certainly represent us well. We do have. I was able to give. I know we kind of wanted to defer questions if people write you notes. You did put up the email there, which is great. We did get one question, and I just want to bounce it off of you real quick because I think it's one you can answer real quickly. What were the name of the chimpanzee offshoot?
I'm happy to answer that. Also, any other you want to roll out? I don't know if we have time to do it or not, but I'll take any questions right now. But anyway, it's easy to remember because it's bonobo, B-O-N-O-B-O, bonobo.
Okay. Bonobo, and one photograph of the bonobos, it looked like there was a cigarette in the guy's mouth.
It's a bamboo shoot.
Yeah, so the question was that really a cigarette?
No, it's a bamboo shoot.
Okay, that's what I thought. I kind of quick glance at it too, and I saw it was a little too brown to be a cigarette. Maybe a mini cigar, but actually it's a bamboo shoot, like you said.
Yeah, it is. They have a reputation as very docile and accommodating animals. As I said, compared to the chimpanzees, who fight constantly, the bonobos, they don't. They are very much into intimate activities, for lack of a better word. But I will tell you this: when I got close to them, my camera bag was open, and I had a Congolese kid who was helping me. They literally filled my camera bag with dirt. So even though they won't hurt you, they may damage your cameras if you're not careful. So anybody else wants to ask a question, I'm happy to field them.
Yeah, that's the only one we got in the Q&A, but I know you did put your email address up. So I would urge anybody that's got any further questions to go ahead and just email Billy. I can tell you from my experience, Billy is very responsive, and he enjoys helping and providing, information from his vast storehouse of experiences. And he's doing something different. So really, the sky is the limit whenever you make the transition. And I think Billy's an example of that. So we appreciate you being here. And with that, I guess I'll go ahead and sign off. Appreciate everybody everybody being present tonight. We're doing these every month. So keep your email open and be looking for other webinars that we'll be doing in transition and for transition topics as well as other topics as well. So Dan, any final word?
No, hey, just Billy, thank you very much for what an inspiring presentation, passion. Really appreciate you taking time. And thank everybody else for joining us tonight too. This is our first, just like Will said, Distinguished Alumni webinar series, many more to follow. But thank you very much, Billy, for just a really powerful presentation. We'll be sending out the recording to this to all the registrants and attendees tomorrow. And then we'll also be sending out to the rest of the foundation membership probably on Friday. So again, thank you for attending. If you haven't done so already, again, we need your support. Please consider making donations to Supply Corps Foundation. And thanks for attending. Enjoy the rest of your evening and look forward to our next webinar in August. More to follow on that. But great. Have a great evening. And thanks again, Billy.
Thank you.